where the sky stretched wide and kissed the sun. The sagebrush whispers, the rivers hum. This land's a story just begun. Wyoming calls, where the heart beats free. Mountains rise and dreams run deep. Past the borders, past the sign, there's a world alive beyond the fence line. Boots hit gravel and the prairie sings with every hoofbeat. The frontier rings from ranchers' hands to miners' veins. The spirit of the West remains. Wyoming calls, where the heart beats free. Mountains rise and dreams run deep. Past the borders, past the sign, there's a world alive beyond the fence line. So come ride with me through the dust and time. Find the soul of Wyoming beyond the fence line, beyond the fence line. Beyond the fence line, beyond the fence
Welcome to Wyoming Beyond the Fence Line, where we step past the headlines and into the truth. This show isn't about left or right, it's about what's real in Wyoming, across the country, and around the world. No spin, no talking points, just facts, context, and honest conversation. If you're tired of being managed instead of informed, you're in the right place. Let's go beyond the fence line. And now, here is your host, Joseph Kibler, candidate for Wyoming governor in 2026. Welcome to Wyoming.
Well, hey everybody. Happy Thursday. What day is it? Thursday. Yeah, it's Thursday. Busy week, huh, you guys? March 19th. With this summer heat wave upon us, I'm just going to get this show done and get outside and get to work. So, before we get started, what's my day look like? I am so glad you asked. Well, today, as many of you know, we had record wind in Cheyenne last week, and boy, do we have fences down all over the city. We have trees down all over the city. So today I am going to be behind a chainsaw most of the day doing this. That's right, doing the grunt work. I'm going to be cutting down some trees. I think I'm even going to be doing some drywall and maybe some other stuff here today too. So, but with that, why don't we go ahead and get into the show? Enough about me and my day. Kind of looks like my flag has moved. Anyways, today we are going to talk about crime, overcriminalization. We're going to talk about consequences. We're going to talk about the death penalty. This is something that I think is a really important topic. It's something I haven't really covered, I don't think, yet since we started the show back in January. And it is an important conversation for us to have. So if this issue is important to you, or you like what you hear on the show, please share it. Please comment. I'd love to interact and engage with you guys. I know a lot of you watch the show every day, but there's not a lot of interaction, and that's totally fine. So we're going to talk about a couple of things today. So I'm going to start out with talking about crime. Help us understand what is it that we're dealing with. Then we're going to talk about consequences and why they must exist. We're going to talk about overcriminalization, which I think is an interesting topic and also one that a lot of people in Wyoming have talked to me about. We're going to talk about the death penalty, and we're going to actually talk about where grace fits into all of this. And then we're going to go on from there. So hopefully this will be an interesting show for you guys. So first of all, who am I? Wait, I should have done that at the beginning of the show, right? Well, I'm Joseph Kibler, right? I'm this guy right here behind me. I am running for Wyoming governor to be something different. I'm a principled conservative. I'm seeking the nomination on the Constitution Party of Wyoming for Wyoming governor. I'm looking forward to a really fun summer campaigning. And guess what? I don't have to worry about the bloodbath, probably, of a primary that's coming up. I get to operate outside the echo chambers for you, the people. So that's really exciting. So let's talk about crime. What are we even dealing with? You know, at its core, crime is a violation of what is right, right? I mean, that's kind of what it boils down to. It's not something that's just breaking a rule or a law. It's causing harm. And I think it's important that we talk about this causing harm part. You know, it is lawlessness. It is often evil. Of course, we have the 10 Commandments in the Bible. You know, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain, thou shalt not commit adultery, and so on. Thou shalt not have, false idols, and so on. So we know that there are these basic, I guess you call them moral foundations or values foundations for our legal system in this country, where we separate right from wrong, good from evil. We've taken things that are truly harmful, violence, theft, destruction of life, and put them in a system of technical violations. And when everything gets labeled the same way, sometimes it kind of gets distorted, right, you guys? We are seeing in our justice system, in our criminal system, where we see people who commit true, evil, horrible, violent crimes, and somehow they're only in prison for a couple of years and they're out, back to do the things again. And then you see someone who commits a victimless crime, right? Where really no one else has been harmed, and maybe except for yourself, I guess. And boy, you're locked up for 30 years. There's a bit of imbalance here when it comes to criminalization, overcriminalization, and how consequences should really tie into actions for someone who's really committing true evil. And I think we've really kind of lost that balance in a lot of our justice system. And it's not to say that our law enforcement and judicial system is irreparably broken or anything like that. In fact, I applaud and I'm so thankful for the people who participate, the people who sacrifice their day, their lives, their time to participate in the activity of keeping us safe and secure. And by the way, I believe One of the very few roles of government is to protect us in our pursuit of life, liberty, integrity, happiness. A very, very small part of what government actually has as a role. But consequences have got to exist. But we need to ask the question, do the consequences fit the crime? Even when I discipline my children, sometimes, and you guys could probably relate to this, sometimes the discipline or the consequences fit the crime, right? You're like, you know what? You did this, to your sister or to your mom or whatever. And this is the consequence, right? And sometimes the consequence is fair and just and right. And sometimes, I'll admit, might be a little too much or might not be enough. And we kind of see that in our justice system, right? Let's talk about consequences. So Galatians 6:7 says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. So understanding that if we sow to things that are evil or wrong for culture, society, or for others, there are consequences to that. And depending on what you do, the consequences are different. Maybe I'll use the example of driving down the road. And let's just say, for argument's sake, that I was driving on Happy Jack Road a couple of years ago here in Cheyenne, and I might have been going, 60 in a 45. Yes, I got pulled over and I faced the consequences of that. I got a nice little handy speeding ticket and was told, you need to slow down, sir. This is a 45-mile-an-hour zone and you were going 60. And of course, I had to show up and pay my fine and recognize that, oops, I need to slow down. I need to obey the speed limit. By the way, I am like, ask my wife, I am like someone that really tries to obey the law when I'm driving, but I always get caught when I'm not. I don't know if any of you guys can relate to that, but I always get caught when I maybe going a little too fast or I didn't stop at the stop sign all the way. And yet I'm like, in a way, I'm like a grandma driver. I'm always driving the speed limit and everyone else is going faster than me, but I'm the one that always gets caught. Anyway, I digress. But now let's say that I am driving over the speed limit, but I am also under the influence. So I'm drunk or under the influence of something else, and I crash head on into another vehicle, and someone dies as a result of that action. There should be consequences for that. Serious consequences. And by the way, in many cases there are. But a lot of times, we may not get the true consequences that we deserve. And I'm going to talk about that in a little while, but understanding the difference between those two scenarios, that the first one I have experienced personally, I shared that with you. Second one, I have not. I don't drink. So I rarely do. Maybe once in a while I'll have a little bit of red wine, but I generally don't drink at all. But the consequences must be there. The consequences are a great deterrent for doing things that we shouldn't do, and especially when it affects others. And that's a lot of what I want to talk about today. Consequences not being harsh enough encourage capital crime and violent crime and crimes that do affect others. And we need to be careful with that. We really, really do. Laws don't mean anything, and justice disappears when we create a system really where sometimes consequences are inconsistent. Sometimes they're excessive in areas and they don't make sense. And sometimes they're weak in other areas where they should be strong. And I kind of talked about that, and when it comes to disciplining my kids, I just realized I have not fully buttoned my sleeve yet. Of course, this is not what I'm wearing today for work. I'll be in my overalls and my grunt work shirt for work today. So maybe that's why I didn't button my sleeves all together this morning. So that's very important. Let's talk about criminalization, overcriminalization, actually. And then we're going to talk about the death penalty, and we're going to talk about grace, where that fits in, and wrap the show up today. Overcriminalization. To my surprise, as I have traveled the state since I've been running for governor, I have had more people approach me, I might argue, approach me about this issue of overcriminalization than any other issue across the state. And I know you're going, Joseph, wait a minute, what's going on there? To my surprise as well, that is not the number one issue I thought I would face when I've gone across the state and spoken to people. And there's always someone, one or two people that pull me aside and say, Joseph, overcriminalization. No crime, no victim, no harm. No one else was harmed. I mean, maybe it might, in a way, be self-harm. Let's say if you're doing a certain activity or whatever. But we overcriminalize this stuff, and you end them in jail for 30 years for a victimless crime. I think that's something we need to talk about. I think that's something we need to have a conversation about. Because also, how does that tie into, perhaps in many cases, it might tie into personal freedom, right? It's an interesting conversation to have. But this happens when government steps beyond its proper role and just starts regulating everything instead of focusing on what actually matters. And I think, Romans 13, 3 and 4 in the Bible, for those of you that know the Bible, tells us that rulers are meant to be a terror to evil, not to good, number one, and that government is supposed to focus on real harm and probably not turn everyday life into just like this sort of legal minefield, if you will, right? But today you have thousands and thousands and thousands of laws, right? And rules and regulations and things like this. And a lot of us, most of us don't even know. We don't even know we're breaking the law half the time, right? Probably don't even know. Oh, gee, I did that and I had no idea that it was against the law. You'd be surprised what's on the books. Most of them are so complex. The average person can't understand them. But also, our representatives don't know either. Like, there's so much that we don't even know anymore. We don't know anymore because it's so complicated. So it creates a system where people are penalized without even, in many cases, intending to be wrong. And that's overreach. I think we need to be careful with that. I think we really do. A balanced system doesn't try to control everything. It focuses on what truly matters. Because when everything becomes a crime, then freedom starts to disappear, right, you guys? And not so much in Wyoming, but there are states across this nation, and even in dealing with the federal government, where activities on your own property and the building of things and maybe too much noise, stuff like this. You actually go to jail, get fined for things, that are really should be your freedom, or you should have right to do those things. So you should, so it's kind of an interesting conversation to have, because sometimes we're getting busy about the wrong things. And also we live in a day, and the Bible talks about this too, where good has become evil and evil has become good. And that has distorted our criminal justice system. And you know what? I wasn't planning on talking about this today, but I'm going to, because I guess it kind of fits in when we talk about life, because we're going to talk about life in a minute. We're going to talk about the death penalty and how the justice system has decided to define the issue of life and abortion here in Wyoming, abortion as health care. The definition of health care is the treatment and prevention of injury, illness, and disease. Funny that pregnancy doesn't fit into any of those. Now, in extremely rare cases, I suppose pregnancy could cause injury to a mother, but those are extremely tragic and rare situations. Guys, go back and watch my show about life. I'm not going to get too deep into this issue, but my point is this: that we've kind of lost balance on what's true, real, and right, and we've exchanged evil for good and good for evil in many cases in our justice system. Let's talk about the death penalty. And the reason why I talked about that life issue just a little teeny tiny bit and then just told you to go back and look at that show. It's called Beyond Life, the Real Pro-Life Challenge. Go look at that show. But the reason I talked about this is because now I want to talk about the death penalty. And this is something that a lot of politicians and people in office, they kind of avoid this topic, if they talk about it at all. Most don't even talk about it. Well, you're going to find on my show and in person when I show up at a town hall or I speak to you, I'm not afraid to talk about these hard issues, and I will, and I'll tell you where I stand. But now let's go to this issue of life, and I want to frame this with, because, right, life, integrity, liberty, what about the death penalty? That's a great question. That's a great question. People get uncomfortable about this, and this is where clarity matters. Genesis 9:6, that whoever says that whoever sheds a man's blood, by his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he is made. It establishes the value of a human life, and that when you commit a capital crime, and by the way, I'm actually going to say capital crime, so I'm not just going to say murder. When you commit a capital crime against another human being, by the way, what are those things? Murder, rape, incest, maiming, severe abuse. Those are capital crimes against a human being. If you commit a capital crime, you have forfeit your life. Your life ought to be forfeit you. Wow, Joseph, that's really strong. I thought you were a Christian and you had grace and you have all this. I do. I really do. But every person has value. And because they're made in the image of God, when you have the intent to commit a capital crime against someone else, that is serious. And capital punishment ought to be the consequence for capital crime. And yes, you ought to have a right to a speedy and fair trial, right? Just trial before a jury of your peers. But then, in addition to that, so you have your swift trial, proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that you have committed this capital crime against a fellow human being and forfeits your life. Consequences ought to be swift and just. Give you 30 days to do whatever you need to do to get your affairs in order, and then your life is forfeit you for the crime that you committed. I go, Joseph, wow, that's pretty harsh coming out of your mouth. This isn't about anger, you guys. This isn't about revenge. It's about recognizing that the same actions carry the highest level, that these actions carry the highest level of consequence. They really do. You have an opportunity to, make things right with your maker, with God and man, and then your life is forfeit you. But here's the interesting thing about swift, concise, capital justice, capital punishment for capital crimes. Guess what happens? You think twice before committing that crime in the first place. So how does this protect the lives of the unborn? How am I tying that in? Well, boy, you might think twice about committing that heinous crime against that woman or that young person if you remember that, oh my goodness, my life is forfeit me if I make this decision. I will lose my life, and it will be swift and it will be just after a fair trial. I will lose my life. You might think twice about committing that crime. You will. You will. So, if any of you are wondering, you probably have gathered. I'm in favor not only of the death penalty, but we really need to bring it back in a way that actually has teeth and it means something. Because we protect innocent life by having those serious consequences in place. I know, hard stance, you guys. I'm going to wrap this up, though, today now with grace. Where does that fall in? The Bible says God is love, but God is also just. So where does grace fit into this? And that's a great question, because I believe in grace, I believe in redemption, and I believe that people can change. And by the way, we'll give that person who commits a capital crime an opportunity to do that before their life is forfeit them. Because, hey, I'm reminded that I am not without sin. That humility matters. I'm not perfect. at all, and I don't pretend to be. But grace does not eliminate consequences, you guys. So I'm going to say that again. Grace does not eliminate consequences for the things that you do. A system that removes consequences in the name of compassion does not protect the people, it creates more harm. It's the bottom line. Grace and justice are not in conflict either, you guys. They work together. Grace speaks to the value of a person, but justice speaks to the weight of an action. So when you separate these two, you lose both, which is, by the way, for the most part, I'm going to talk about Wyoming. I could talk about the country, but I'll talk about Wyoming. It's been many decades since someone has had to pay the price for a capital crime in Wyoming with their life. Many decades. So it's something to think about. As we step back and we look at this, it really comes down to clarity. A system that knows the difference between right and wrong, where the consequences are real and consistent, protecting innocent life without trying to be in control of every part of your life. And that's what Wyoming deserves. I want to say this last little bit again, because I think it's important. It's profound. Grace does not eliminate consequences. A system that removes consequences in the name of compassion does not protect the people. It creates more harm. And we need to understand that. Grace and justice are not in conflict. They work together. Grace speaks to the value of a person. Justice speaks to the weight of an action. And when you separate the two, you lose both. And I wanted to say that again because I think it's really important for all of us to understand that. I'm talking with my hand a lot today. Do I do that a lot, you guys? Oh, maybe I do. So, a system that protects innocent life without trying to control every part of your life, that's what we are aiming for. That's what we all deserve. That's what victims deserve. Because without that, the person who always suffers the most is not the person who's committed the crime, but the person who's been the victim of the crime. And they're already suffering enough. You know what? And I will end cap this with one more thing. Prison should be a miserable place. It should not be an enjoyable place. It should be absolutely miserable. It should not be a place you want to be, see, or go either. So in addition to capital punishment, prison should not be a fun place. It should be actually terrible and horrible. You're in prison. That's what it's for. It shouldn't be fun. Wyoming spends per incarcerated person in Wyoming. Wyoming spends more money than the average household income on a single incarcerated person every year. We need to look at that. Prison needs to be miserable. It needs to be the most unhappy place on the planet. No perks. Nothing. Now, if we're looking at restoration for those that don't commit capital crimes, we can look at those things. That's a separate today. So we're not going to have that conversation today. So to wrap this up, it only happens when we go back to the first principles. When we stop chasing complexity, we start chasing the truth again. The faith that grounds us, the family that shapes us, the freedom that belongs to us in the future where justice actually makes sense. And that's how we can be something different. So with that, you guys, I'm going to wrap this show up. I'd love to hear your personal experiences. Maybe you've experienced this in your life. This seems to be a very popular topic in this state, and that's why I'm addressing it. Well, not only because it's popular, I also want to address it because it needs to be addressed, and no one else really does, or not a lot of people talk about it. So wrapping this show up, hope you guys have a safe day. I know a lot of you probably getting out and getting to work today, getting things going. God bless you guys. Be safe out there, and I will see you tomorrow. What am I doing tomorrow? Oh, you know what? Tomorrow on the show, we're talking about Wyoming's economy. We're going to talk about what's going on in the world of the economy, the future. I might even talk a little bit about inflation, stuff like that too tomorrow. Where are we at on all that stuff? Anyways, I'll say it again. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful, blessed day. And I'm going to fire up my outro. And what are we going to play today? What music am I going to leave you guys with today? How about let's do Code of the West? So I'll go with the outro, and then we'll play some Code of the West for you guys. Take care.
That's today's episode of Wyoming Beyond the Fence Line with Joseph Kibler, candidate for Wyoming governor in 2026. If this mattered to you, share it, stay engaged, and keep asking hard questions. Be something different. Visit Joseph4wy.com for more information.
Sun comes up on a small town road, coffee in a thermos, steel-toe boots. You don't flinch when the wind blows cold. You just do what you're born to do. Calloused hands on a busted gate, fix what's broke till it holds its weight. You don't cut corners, don't fake the shine. You see it through every single time. That's the code of the West. Stand tall, give your very best. Your word is the mark on your chest. You ride for your people, you don't forget. Some things you just can't buy. A clean heart and a clear sky, know where to draw that line. That's the code of the West. That's the way I ride. You shake a hand, that's a 90. Doesn't change with the way you feel. If you say you'll show, you'll be on time. Rain on the roof or a blue sky shine. You wear the name on your paycheck proud. Hold up the crew when the chips fall down. You don't brag big, you just get it done. Few words spoken, but you speak in tongues. That's the code of the West.